Welcome to the Villa Pride Down Under podcast, an Aston Villa supporters podcast brought to you here from Australia. This week you have your usual three, myself, Tess and Rhino. Hello lads, how are you?
Good, mate, good.
And
Doing good. Hopefully you can hear me and I'm not breaking up this week.
No, we can hear you okay. And this week we also have a very special guest, someone we've been looking to get on the podcast since we set it up. We'd like to welcome Jacob Tanswell, who is the Aston Villa's correspondent for the brilliant newspaper article, The Athletic. Jacob, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good to be. I know we've been speaking for the last few months ever since you set this up. So yeah, good to be on.
No, we really appreciate you giving your time because I know it's International Week is probably the one time you get a bit of a break. So to give us your time is really appreciative. Jacob, we're kind of going to veer away from the reviewing the games today because I'm sure you're going to do that in many podcasts over the next couple of weeks. So I just kind of had a few questions for you because obviously I'm a big fan of your articles and I love your kind of tactical analysis and stuff. I just kind of wanted to ask you, like, because we try not to be too negative in this podcast because it's just we're all based in Australia. It's nice to stay positive in some degree, you know. But I just wanted to ask you about what have you kind of seen that's kind of gone a bit south tactically in the last couple of weeks? What's changed for you?
Yeah, I think if tactics are kind of meaningless if there's not an intensity to certain things and a quality. And I think tactically, I don't think there was many issues against Liverpool, for example, because Villa still got the ball into the final third quite well. Defensively, from open play, they were fine. Martinez didn't have many saves to make. So I think, unlike Bruges, where they look quite slow and formulaic and quite dull, they were actually okay against Liverpool. It's just that quality in the final third, I think. The players individually is still really important. I know in this modern world where we all talk about tactics and structures, having quality up front is ultimately the decisive factor. And Villa haven't got the form at the moment among their attacking players. So I think that's a really important issue. And potentially, like there always is with football evolves, go through cycles. Some teams are probably understanding how Villa play a lot more. Emery doesn't really change much in terms of his own shape. He won't go to a five at the back, for example. Teams can organise quite well. So it's up to Villa now to kind of evolve and tweak certain parts.
Do you think would it be unfair for me to say it, like in your opinion, like that Emery almost played Duran out of form? Like when you have someone in a hot streak like that, should you play him more, or do you just think that he just doesn't fit tactically for 90 minutes? Like,
do you know what? I said this the other day. Actually. I actually think he should have played less because I think in the last couple of games he's playing too much. Like I would never have brought him on that early against Tottenham, for example. I think Duran's obviously a really good player, and an impactful player, but he doesn't actually understand pressing and the things that Watkins does so well. Link up play, when to press. He often just does his own thing, which is great if you want a bit of chaos. But at times where Villa are trying to stay into games where it's quite evenly balanced, I think Duran's been playing too much and it's suffered as a result. I don't know if you feel compelled to play him more because he's scored, but I don't know what you think, but in the sample size we've seen of Watkins and Duran together, it's not really worked. So, I know he's coming on after 60 minutes at the moment. I wouldn't mind if he came on a little bit later. I think the impact would be the same, if anything.
Yeah. What do you reckon about that, Tess?
Yeah, just interesting because I think he came on early. When he started coming on and scoring a few goals, I think his confidence was really, really high. He wasn't getting that many minutes, and when he did get the minutes, it was just interesting to see that. As you said, Jay,
we're just losing you there, Tess. You're freezing a bit, bud. Yeah, sorry, Tess. We just lost you there, man. Yeah, you're just freezing, bud. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to jump out and jump back in.
Yeah, no worries.
I love
what do you think?
Look, there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about playing Watkins and Duran together. And for me, I just can't see it working for Villa. Like Jacob's just saying, I think Duran kind of just does his own thing. And, I just can't see him suiting a structure with two strikers up there. And I think it puts a lot of other players out of position. And I don't know, I think it'd be too many changes around to accommodate having two up front. And I think Duran, he's had a hot streak, but Ollie Watkins, let's not forget, his last couple of seasons have been unreal and has earned his spot to play up front. And, we talk about playing players into form. I know there's been a lot of talk of Leon Bailey trying to play him into form, but I feel like Ollie Watkins is one of those players that you can play into form. And he does have these streaks, it's typical of Ollie Watkins to sort of have a barren spell. But then once he gets one, he goes off on a bit of a run then. So I kind of agree with Jacob that I just can't see Duran Watkins front line working. And I think, persevere with Ollie Watkins for a little bit. And I think it's the players behind Watkins as well. I think the service has been a little non-existent and the quality of the service hasn't been great. And I think that's probably where we're not functioning. I think defensively we've had some issues, but I think the biggest issue for us at the moment is that final third, isn't it? And getting a bit of continuity and just making some chances. It seems like a lot of our players in that final third are out of form at the moment, which is unfortunate, but it's just something we're going to have to work through. And hopefully this international break has come at a good time for us so we can come back refreshed.
Jacob, were you surprised to see Bailey start Saturday?
Not really, because he's probably the only player that can do what he can in terms of stretching play. When you against Spurs, you probably saw when McGinn and Ramsey play, you don't have actually any pace in behind that can threaten him in behind. So that's kind of the issue, because Bailey's not playing very well. I did a piece on it this morning, but he's so important to how Villa play, because he's the only real wide player that has actually got ability to go in behind. And that's why you have to play him, because if you don't, then you kind of get stuck, and the other team, like Spurs did, can just press. So it's very difficult to not play him, but at the same time, if you had another option, say Moussa Diaby or a Philogene who is in better form, you could probably play him instead.
Yeah, Tess, you're back. Welcome back, man. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can at the moment. I must agree now. I didn't think Bailey would start Saturday, but I do get what you're saying with the spacing behind Robertson and stuff. I suppose he is kind of the only one that's going to exploit that. And we were kind of saying as well, Jacob, we said from Rhino on a podcast last week, and we were kind of saying, is it kind of too simple to say, like, when Ollie Watkins was playing and he had Danny Ings breathing down his neck, he was really patchy. As soon as Emery saw it with Ings, Watkins went on this amazing run. And now, like, what with Duran, he had kind of the free run of it last season. No, Duran's breathing down his neck and he's gone patchy again. Is that coincidence, or do you think does he really just need that much love, like where I am the main man? Like, do you think he struggles with the pressure of it? Yeah,
do you know, I've wondered that recently as well. I think that is a really good point, and I don't know Ollie Watkins personally. I wouldn't know. Some people, maybe like Leon Bailey, need that competition. I think with Watkins, he's always quite enjoyed being that main man, and I think it was a big compliment to him when they sold Danny Ings, and he just became the only guy really. I don't think it helps that he's coming off after 60 minutes, which is kind of not great, because typically historically strikers tend to get more space, better chances towards the end of the game. So he's doing all this work at roughing up defenders. For example, it's Bayern Munich, it's roughing up Upamecano, 1v1's really good, and then Duran came on and exploited that space and with his goal. Yeah. So I don't think it helps. I wouldn't mind seeing him playing more, but he's not quite sharp, is he? He's lost that yard of pace. I'm sure it's not going to be terminal, but it'll come back. But it's just, I don't think the pre-season helps. He only had a week off before he came back into the league games. Had no pre-season friendlies. He had a little bit of an injury as well, so that takes a toll as well. But like you say, I do think we could be having this discussion in 3 weeks' time, and he might have 2 or 3 goals. So I don't think it's at the end of the world at the moment.
Before I pass you over to Tess, my last question for you around the tactical kind of side of it, is there any situation at all where you see, with JJ Ramsey being injured now again, is there any chance he moves Watkins to the left to start the run?
No, I don't think so. Watkins, no. We saw he actually got the ball on the left first half against Liverpool, and I thought, okay, this is the Watkins that was at Exeter, and he doesn't really dribble with it anymore. He is becoming just an out-and-out number 9 who gets about 15 touches a game. And yeah, I think he's up front, and it's an interesting thing. Maybe something could happen like that, but yeah, it would take a lot of building to just even adapt to that position.
Yeah. No, just I can't see it myself, but I think it could be a solution if we're struggling on that left, because at the moment we have no goal threat from wide really whatsoever, and I thought maybe that could be a possible solution. But Des, I'll pass you over to you. I know you have a couple of questions for Jacob. So belt away, mate.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me now. I've switched over to a different kind of internet. It's just it work for me. Welcome, Jacob. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. Really good to sort of introduce you to any of the Australian supporters who don't know who you are, etc. I've been a big supporter and a big fan of yours for the writing that you do with The Athletic. I don't mean to make you smile and all that kind of stuff, but you write some really, really interesting stories and stories that not everyone will get to hear or to see or to read. Can you just give us a little bit of an insight? Because I know in 2021 you won an award as a student footballers writer. Can you give us a bit of inside information on how you began and what made you want to become a sports writer?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a footballer like everyone did until probably really deep down the age of about 14. But I stayed in an academy at Bournemouth until I was 16. Went to Eastleigh, which is for those that don't know, it's like in National League, so the 5th tier of English football. Could have got a professional, but at that time my heart wasn't really in it. So I just started volunteering, writing for websites because I understood the tactical elements. Start off with, didn't really know anything about how you become a journalist or how to gather information correctly. But I did that. Wrote a few articles for different websites. Went to university. University, you don't really need. Looking back, I probably should have gone, but I went anyway. And because of the experience I gathered, my 17, 18, 19, then managed to get a job at a local website covering AFC Bournemouth. And then, like every other job, you just progress in your career. And you learn a lot more. But 3 years ago, I was probably solely a feature and tactical writer, and now I've become a bit more involved in news gathering, transfers, contracts, injury news, etc. So it's just about building and improving, like it is with every career, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's
really interesting because sorry, Spud, did I cut out there?
No, you're right. Yeah, you cut out there some of it, mate.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, really interesting because some of the writing that you do and the stories that you do just seem to have that real in-depth kind of feel to it, and kind of makes, for me, when I read your stories, makes me feel a little bit closer to the club. Do you often get that feedback?
Yeah, I do, which is great. And I think what's really interesting is that I think initially when I was covering Villa, a lot of work, obviously saying a lot about my tactical analysis, which is great. It's probably my primary strength. But in a way, I didn't know anything about the club at that time, so I had to lean back on my tactical understanding, and just because I didn't know anything about players, I didn't know have any contacts, didn't have any sources, didn't really know the history of the club. I couldn't really do those other pieces initially. So I was going to tactical analysis, but then I moved on, and now I think it's become a bit broader, the coverage. So
definitely,
yeah, I'm really enjoying it. But it's important to get a balance. So some games I think, right, I'm going to really focus on the tactics this week. Some games I think, right, I'm going to think about the fans, the fan issues that are going on in Villa Park. So yeah, it's important, I think, for everyone to be quite varied.
That piece you done about Duran's background, I thought that was brilliant. I really enjoyed it, because I think it was. I don't think there was any other piece like it from any other journalist that I'd seen out there, and I knew nothing about him. I just knew him as this guy who comes off the bench a bit crazy and scores goals. But like you really kind of brought to life his background for me, and I really enjoyed it. And as I said to you many times myself, obviously I do enjoy the tactical side of it, and I hope you don't go too far away from it. But you've definitely given much broader kind of articles now, and it's really good.
Thank you.
What's the club like at giving access to you, Jacob? Do you is there a good relationship with the club, and do you get sort of not free reign, but good access into Bodymore Heath and areas of the ground and to access to the players, or is it quite rigid and structured where you've got to sort of ask, go through a chain of command, let's say, to get hold of people, or write things that you want to write? How does that sort of work?
Yeah, it's careful how I answer this. In terms of being a journalist, it's I'm sure it's at every other club. You only go to Bodymore really for a press conference, before games. ordinarily at other clubs, you might go in to watch under 21 games. Unfortunately, you don't have that access at Villa, but I'm sure they've got their reasons for that. With Villa, they won't ever tell me I can't write anything, because ultimately I don't work for them. They'll, the way our sourcing works is that, it's on the Athletic website, so it's not like I'm revealing anything here. But if we write any story, like today we broke the Ramsey Kamara injury news, anything like that, we always go to Villa, their communications team, for a heads up if they want to add anything, if they want to deny anything. So they always get courtesy. They're never going to be ambushed by the story. So we like to have that professional relationship. But I think in terms of interviews and things like that, of course, that's a lot harder to ascertain from Villa. But every communication department at clubs is different. When I was covering Bournemouth, obviously it's a smaller club, they were more accommodating with interviews. But sure, because Villa's a bigger club, it's naturally going to be more difficult.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, like, it must be mad coming from Bournemouth up to, like, because you've done a little bit of Bournemouth, did you? And then you went to Southampton and then on to Villa. When did you kind of find out you were getting the Villa job, like the Villa kind of gig?
Yeah, so it's quite a good step, I guess. It's like a football's career. You start at Bournemouth when they were in the Championship. They got promoted that year. Then you go to Southampton, which is obviously a bigger club. And that's great. And then I think a week before the end of the season, when Southampton were already relegated by then and Villa were about to play Brighton to get into the Conference League, I got offered the job. It wasn't the case of them telling me I had to get it, but it was like, would you want it? Greg Evans, my predecessor, was going to Liverpool. There's a vacancy there. Would you like it? And I said yes, in the next 24 hours. So I was actually watching that Brighton game with really quite vested interest, because I was thinking I really want them to qualify so I could get to go to all these trips. So it was in May, and I moved to the Midlands about 3 weeks later. So it was a bit of a whirlwind.
Was that important to move into the area, do you think?
Yeah, I think initially, because you need to obviously understand and the club, you need to understand the area, get to know Villa Park, surrounding areas, establish contacts, sources. I'm quite lucky. I don't have to write too many articles a week, so I have a lot of time to meet people, establish relationships, and a lot of them are obviously based in Birmingham, a lot based in London as well. But initially, I think it's really important to put your feet on the ground and go into the club you're covering.
You have any more questions there, Tess, about his journey through?
Yeah, I just want to. So I guess a bit of a fun question. You would have probably done a few interviews now. Who have you found the most interesting or entertaining, if you like it, if you're allowed to say, player at Aston Villa so far?
Ooh. John McGinn's my favourite to speak to. I think it's like having an interview with a friend down the pub. I'm not saying we're particularly close, or close at all, but he's just very normal. He's not media trained. He's just a really nice, polite man who's funny, who doesn't worry about speaking out of turn. He won't do that, but he's just very calm and relaxed. I think Amadou Annan is a really interesting guy, very confident. Very young, but he speaks with such maturity. Got a really good background, very interesting background, so that's great. But I'm sure if John Durand actually stopped and chatted rather than singing all the time as he walked through past me, I think that'd be a really interesting interview.
He does seem like he's always singing, or you see the club videos where he's just walking past, when they're just about to go into training, and he just always seems to have something weird to say, John Duran, or not necessarily weird, but just something that's just a bit out there and just a little bit different. It would be good to kind of have an interview and see, talk to him in length and find out all about him and how he sees things. It would be really, really interesting. And as for Amadou, as long as you don't call him Andre, you should be all right.
What about Emery, Jacob? Is he quite engaging to you?
Do you know what? A lot of people obviously, they see highlights of him and they think he's quite, robotic, and there's a language barrier, obviously, so he's not going to be, naturally engaging. But I think I find him really interesting, especially away from the cameras, because press conferences work in two ways. You have the broadcast section, which obviously the camera's on, and then you have the written section, for written journalist. And I think off the camera, he's actually, when you see the written quotes, he's really engaging. I think he's a good talker. If there's quite a few journalists that go, so you're probably limited to 2 questions. I do think in the times where I found it most engaging is when there's only been a couple of journalists, so I've been able to speak to him and ask 3 or 4 or 5 questions, and that really gets him into detailed conversation. He can really put his teeth into some answers. But I find him really engaging. I think the football department in general, everyone around there, I get on well with. I think they're really good people. I think they're elite. Obviously, 2 different clubs really at Villa. You got off the field and on the field staff. So that's taken into consideration. But I think, going back to your point, Emery's really just a nice guy. He's very polite. But again, it comes across as very tactically obsessive, and he's very focused on just football and only football.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Does the love of football, does the passion really shine through when you're speaking to him? Yeah, because he seems like someone that just would engage you. Like,
he does give very long answers. A lot, which is good. He's not the type of guy that you could tell that he's just getting annoyed with being in press conferences, because you must take a toll on him, because he's Villa playing so many games. He's got to do before and after, and as well as all the other commitments. I'd personally get sick of them all, and I probably give short trips and short answers. But he gives the same every time. So although he's not going to stop afterwards to have a chat with you. He'll just go back to his office and look at a tactics board, or I'm being facetious, but he's probably going to do something else. He's still quite polite, and he gives you a good amount of time.
I know Rhino had a few questions for you there as well, Jacob, if that's all right.
Yeah, mine sort of comes on to, you've jumped on, become a journalist covering Aston Villa at a really good time. Obviously, the club's gone, into the Europa Conference League, Champions League now. How does that sort of work for you as a journalist? Because obviously there's a lot more games to cover. And, for a Champions League away game, how does that work, Jacob? Do you obviously, you'd be flat out at the moment.
Yeah, it's difficult, because on one hand, obviously, you don't have to come up with too many ideas, because you've got games and pieces can be structured around that. So, which is great. But at the same time, it's travel is quite full on. So, I sometimes don't go to the press conference the day before a away game. So, for example, on December 10th, when Villa play Leipzig, I'll travel on the day of the game. I think I've got a 5:30 flight in the morning, go to Berlin, then 2 hours to Leipzig. I'll obviously get straight to the stadium. The game's at 8 o'clock, so it won't finish. Emery won't come in for his press conference afterwards till midnight. And then I'll be writing till about 2 or 3 a.m. So I'd probably be a 22-hour day. And then obviously that affects then your next day and getting back and everything. So although it's only one game and it's absolutely brilliant to go to these games, it probably does take up quite a big chunk of your working week.
I was going to say as well, what's been your favourite moment or article so far covering the Villa, mate? Is there anything that sort of stands out to you?
I really liked, like I said, I liked the John Duran piece. I think any interviews with club legends is always great. I actually, one of my favourites is probably the Finn Azaz one. Actually, I drove to Middlesbrough, which is it's about 5 hours away. But it's really, I went to his house, just me and him, right access, and we managed to do an article on him helping out at hospice and things like that, which was great. And finding out people's backgrounds, something that I love doing. So probably that. Although it's ultimately it was a Villa player that didn't play any games, but it was I thought it was really interesting, and he was very generous with his time.
I think they're the best ones, though, aren't they? When you see a bit of insight into players, because we see players on the field and the interviews after the game, but it's very same, isn't it? But it's good to see these articles now where you get a more of a background. You get to see what these players are doing outside of the game, what their interests are, and someone like Finn Azaz, his career's kicked on a bit, isn't he? He's doing quite well at Middlesbrough, and it's good to see. It's really good to see. And is there any, talking about, academy players, mate, you're close to the club. Is there anyone coming through that the club are really excited about? Or is there someone that you think, in the next few years, Villa supporters should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think there's a few that Villa are excited about. I think Villa have got really good 21s and 18s at the moment that, hopefully some will kick on, but at the same time, you've got to be aware of that PSR elephant in the room. So you don't know how many will actually kick on. But I think Caden Young's someone they're very excited about. Patterson as well is something that's been mentioned to me. And then you've got Ben Broggio, who's, he's been training sometimes with Villa's first team, even a year ago when he was very young. So I think he's very important as well. But they've got a lot of good young players. Amari Kellerman was seen as, one person that would really step up this year. So it's such a shame that he had to leave. But those players in particular, I think have got a big future.
What about Louis Barry, Jacob? What think going to happen there? Because he's having really good time on stop.
Yeah, he is. But I think there might be question marks over his physicality to the Premier League right now. Obviously, he's in League Two, right? So this League One and League Two, the lower league. So the gap is quite big to bridge. And it's maybe a feeling that if he was going to break in, it would have been, under Dean Smith or Gerrard, when he was, although younger, there was more of an opportunity, whereas it looks a bit difficult now. I think he's obviously doing brilliantly. So he might be the type of player that you can actually sell for a good profit this summer. But again, you wouldn't be surprised if he did stick around, but I think his future might be a little bit more elsewhere.
With yourself there, Tess, have you anything else to add to that?
No, I was just going to ask about. I was just thinking about Aston Villa tactically at the moment. We've got a really good group of players at the moment. If come summer, January to summer, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the summer transfer window, to be honest, unless you really, really need someone. But come the summer, is there any sort of particular area that Aston Villa, in your opinion, should target to improve the squad?
I think, I'm sure you've probably spoken about it before. Maybe right back is probably the issue. I think they've got one that Emery really trusts in Matty Cash, but even then, in bigger games, he plays Konsa there, keeps Cash on the bench. So if they can get a really good elite right back, it would obviously help with depth, but also you might not have to play Leon Bailey out wide all the time because the width and pace could come from that out and out right back. Where if Konsa plays right back and then you play McGinn as well, they're not natural wingers or wide players. So it comes a bit stodgy there. So I think right back's an issue. They would have, signed a right back undoubtedly in the previous window had PSR issues not being a concern. I think Gertrude was one they certainly wanted. So I think right back would be probably the top of the list.
Was there anything in the links to Jeremy Frimpong, do you think? Sorry, Des. Was there anything in the links to Jeremy Frimpong that time, or was that just rumours, do you reckon?
Frimpong was one they wanted before the last window, and it was someone they kept an eye on before that. But again, his price would have been extortionate, especially after winning the league with Leverkusen, right?
Yeah. Sorry, Des, what are you going to say there, man?
Does he not trust Matty Cash in those big games, do you think? Or he just tries to be a bit more solid by playing Konsa there? Because, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of Konsa playing at right back. I think he is better at centre back. I think he's a really, really good, strong player at centre back. And I feel like we get a little bit exposed sometimes when he plays at right back because it's not really his position. But then I wonder why sometimes if Cash is fit, he doesn't play Cash there. Is it just a trust thing, or?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors. I completely agree with you, Tess, in terms of I think Ezri Konsa, I would actually say he's probably the best centre back Villa have got in terms of overall reliability. Doesn't make any mistakes, and I'd rather keep him there. So the Villa have only got one problem position rather than two. But with Ezri Konsa right back, he can do the job. But Emery noted games last year against Man City, Arsenal, the 2 home league wins where Konsa played right back. So it shows it can work. I think he probably plays Konsa more than Cash in certain games simply because of the height issue, and he's more inclined to stay conservative in his position. He's not going to, overload and overlap. So I think Konsa can play there, but at the same time, he does trust Cash. He still plays Cash in a lot of games, but he's had a few injuries recently, hasn't he, Cash? So you can't play every single one.
Yeah. Probably as well, it probably comes down to the fact that Bailey he probably needs someone that's going to sit there a bit more. Like, because if you play Cash, it kind of pushes on because Bailey's not really offering much from a defensive point of view now. So I think it'll leave you pretty exposed if you just let Cash fly up the wing and Bailey's not coming back to cover. I think that probably comes a little bit into play against the better teams too, does it?
Yeah, I completely completely agree with you. I think you have Cash and Bailey could be, sometimes risky in bigger games where you're not going to have a lot of the ball.
Did you expect Morgan Rogers to come on so good this season already? We kind of bought him. He came in and then he kind of played sort of bit parts to start with, didn't he? Because we had injuries. He came in and he kind of played off the left a little bit. And then I watched the preseason and I thought, oh my God, he's not what I thought. I'd never seen him play. Like, he's a big unit for a start. And that close control that he has, I was just like, where have you found this guy from? Like, unbelievable. And then so far this season, like, he's almost like number one on the team sheet, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't expect anything like this because I was actually covering Bournemouth when he was on loan there, and to be truthfully told, he was really, really poor. He got sent home. He got sent back early. Wasn't in any squads for a long time. He's playing left wing back. Really wide. Scott Parker didn't trust him. Probably one of the few players that was really disappointing that season. So. And I watched him then in games when he went to Blackpool on loan, when he joined Middlesbrough, and I thought, okay, he's getting better, but he's probably a championship player. And then when you heard about the interest from Villa, you're like, oh wow, like what is this? And then you think, okay, Emery's seen something in him. And then we obviously did a piece on Morgan actually this summer with his brother, which is another one I enjoyed. And they was talking about. A lot of the analysis before the Middlesbrough Cup game in January was about Rodgers. Emery really loved him, the way he carried the ball. As soon as you saw him, start his couple of games, you think, okay, you can see the talent. And like you're right, this year has been, he's probably Villa's, most informed attacker. He's suffering now physically. I think he's had a lot of games. There's a bit of burnout with him, but I think he's probably been the best. But he's going to sign a new contract, and that's obviously largely due to. Putting his salary on relatively the same as everyone else because he just, like Duran, he was on earning not as much as a lot of his teammates. So it's more than deserved. And yeah, I'm shocked by his progress, but he's been absolutely fantastic.
Then the club must be sorry. No, go sorry, Ryan.
No, I was just going to say, with Morgan Rogers coming in and you see Ollie Watkins, there's games earlier in the season where you could see it was a bit of you can't call it competition, but there'd be a pass or a cutback that Rodgers did, and Watkins wasn't too happy with it. And do you think it's hard to fit both of those players in, and are they still trying to work that dynamic out with Rodgers playing behind Watkins?
Yeah, I think with Rodgers, probably one of the reasons why he's not in the England squad yet is because of that final ball. I think he's got into so many great positions, driving the ball, shrugging players off. Driving really at the centre backs, but that final pass hasn't been there for Watkins. So of course they can play together. They're different positions and they can work well. I just think it's the final ball and the disconnect. I think you saw that at Anfield a number of frustrating times because Villa have got into that final third, but that last bit of quality or belief wasn't there. And I think Rodgers got everything, but he's only young. Decision making and end products typically something that comes with age. So he just needs that, to maybe slow himself down when he's running at that pace, just to realize what the picture is ahead of him. But yeah, he's an excellent player.
He definitely should have scored.
Be good.
He definitely should have scored the equaliser against Liverpool. No, like that was a massive chance in the game. I think that goals change games, and I think we'll never know. But you would, if that had went in, it's a very, very different game, and that's that second half I felt anyway, and that's probably what is leaving him down to the final ball. But his ability to carry the ball is just something I haven't seen in a long, long time. But Jacob, myself and Ryan were talking about this last week, and we're kind of in a little bit of a slump at the moment. It's not the end of the world, but it's clear to see we're not playing brilliantly. Do you think the senior players need to step up a little bit more? Because you find even the older senior players, they're all looking for Rodgers, expecting him to do something. And I think it's becoming a little bit predictable now that all the players get it to Rodgers, get us up the pitch. And he does look a little bit burnt out from it. Do you find that? Do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think you probably, talking about John McGinn and Ollie Watkins, really, we've obviously spoken about Watkins, but McGinn's also a type of player that can carry the ball, can really drive with it when he's at his best in those little pockets of space. And he was fantastic in, especially early on at the start of last season against the likes of Man City. I thought he was absolutely fantastic that day, in Villa's best performance in probably a decade. So you probably need him back in form. Jacob Ramsey's obviously ongoing issues injury-wise is not helping, because he's also a guy that can carry the ball up as well. So you've got a few players that you're probably looking at, at what point does Buendia come back fit, really sharp, and he's the type of player that can alternate with Rodgers as well. So I think there's a few players around that are older than him that are going through a few struggles for various reasons.
And like Tielemans has obviously had a good, like a brilliant start to the season, like in that kind of pivot. Do you think there's any? Because I know Emery loves Kamara, like it's clear as day. He's trying to get Kamara match fit as quickly as possible, which you can't blame him because of what he does for the team. Do you see any situation whereas if we can continue lacking creativity, that Kamara and Onana become the double pivot and they push Youri Tielemans up into the 10?
Yeah, I think I spoke about it on another podcast. I wouldn't mind seeing Tielemans there sometimes in the number 10, because when you're struggling with the final ball like Rodgers has, sometimes Tielemans can do that. So yeah, I wouldn't mind that at certain points, but at the same time, it's just about keeping all these players fit, because Tielemans is not going to Belgium, away with Belgium, because he's got an ongoing knee issue that will need to be managed for a good amount of time. Kamara is now injured with a hamstring injury for a few weeks, so that's going to be a problem. But again, I do think Kamara and Tielemans will probably be the first choice, with Onana coming in and really being almost like Emery's project in a way, a little bit like Rodgers. He'll, at some point, Onana's going to get brilliant, and he might replace Tielemans or Kamara. But I do think right now Kamara and Tielemans will be the first choice midfield.
And any more questions for Jacob there, Tess?
Yeah. So I guess my final question is: if Villa make Champions League this season, are you going to come onto the pod and wear a Villa top?
If you give me 10 days warning, and if Villa get the Champions League, I will get the top, and I will pay whatever the amount it is to get it.
Have you a favourite away ground to go to travelling with Villa, Jacob? Like what club is really accommodating to the journalists and stuff?
I think everyone will probably say the Tottenham Stadium. Obviously, it's the newest, the great, the most expensive. It's absolutely fantastic in terms of the amount of people there. So that's probably my favourite. Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't been there now, but it's meant to be fantastic. Yeah. I was said right now. Have anything else left to ask Jacob before we?
No, I think I'm pretty much covered, fellas. I think Jacob's given me everything I wanted there, to be honest.
Tess, any final words there before we wrap up?
Oh yeah, look, just really important to firstly thank you for coming on to our podcast out here in Australia. Obviously, none of us sound Australian, but we're out here and we're like huge Villa supporters, and we reach out to all of our Aussie supporters as well, just to create a network and a family out here. So really, thank you for coming. I just want to, for those who do listen to the podcast, please like and subscribe, but also check out the description. I'll leave a description there for Jacob, where you can find him on The Athletic. Please read his pieces; they're awesome. And he's always writing. There was a new piece today, actually, probably a couple of hours ago, maybe an hour a bit ago, that got released. So go and check that out. And I've got a few of those sort of free trial things as well somewhere. So hit me up on my DMs, and I'm more than happy to share them with you, so you can have a read of Jacob's pieces.
Jacob, we're very grateful for you coming on, man, because obviously you're busy time and the only bit of downtime you got, and you decided to jump on a podcast in Australia. So we're very very grateful for that. And just all I can say really, Jacob, is keep banging out those articles, man, because every one of them is interesting, and I really enjoy them, and the variety is just something that I love personally. For people in Australia that may not have come across your work, Jacob, which is, I think, is probably unlikely. You're not a secret anymore. Where's the best place for them to find you and access your articles and stuff?
Yeah, thank you, guys. Best route to my articles is on The Athletic, or if you've got a New York Times subscription, just press on the Athletic handle. So probably there, and then on the Aston Villa section, I guess. So all of those will be on there.
And the last question, I'm going to put you on the spot, Jacob. Do you see us getting back into Europe this year?
I hope back into Europe. Yeah. I hope back into Europe. Yeah, it'll be very difficult to get Champions League again. 2 years in a row would be a brilliant achievement. So the jury's out on that. But I think Europe Europa League, maybe, I think would be a really good target. And going deep in this year's Champions League would be also constitute a great season. So maybe around between 4th and 7th, I don't think would be too bad.
Would Emery be happy with that, do you think? Do you think Emery, if we had a good run in the Champions League and we got back into the Europa, or do you think he'd see that as a back step?
I think he'd see it as a back step because he's a perfectionist, right? He always wants more. He wants to improve every year. So any reduction in league standing will be a bit of a blow to him. But for any Villa fan, after 2 years ago with Gerrard and Dean Smith, and mid-table to fighting to stay up, finishing 6th is not exactly a failure,
No, definitely not. And we'll all go to Munich in May for the final anyway. Jacob, thanks a million for your time, mate, and we really appreciate it. And enjoy your bit of downtime, mate, because I'm sure we're going to be coming back into that Christmas program now. It's going to be absolutely hectic. And last question I had for you: when the draw came out for the Champions League, which game were you most looking forward to?
Has to be the first one. So even if it was Bologna, for example, at home first, it was always going to be that one. The fact it was Bayern Munich was very special on the repeat of the the Champions League or the European Cup final, in the 80s. That was very special.
Yeah, brilliant. Anything else, boys, before we go?
No, I just want to say thank you very much, mate.
No,
Appreciate
it.
it.
Really, just grateful.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
See you, Jacob. Thanks a million, mate. Up the Villa.
Cheers,
Up
guys.
the Villa.
Bye.
Up the Villa.